announcements that I have.
Gentleman from Arlington, Mr. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege and a motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, my moment in black history is someone who has been referred to as just an ordinary hero. Her name is Joan Mulholland of Arlington County, Virginia, and she's my constituent. But Joan just wasn't just an ordinary hero. I believe she was extraordinary. She was a white Southerner who grew up being told that segregation was just the way things were, but she thought about how she would change it. At an early age, her eyes were open, and she knew that someone had to do something about it. She's been called a segregationist's worst nightmare, a dangerous threat to the power structure because she was one of their own. It all started in 1961, where Joan was involved in sit-ins across Arlington, Virginia. Within a couple of weeks of that movement, all the lunch counters in Arlington were desegregated. But she didn't stop there. She took the movement to Glen Echo Park in Maryland and sought to desegregate the merry-go-round and the swimming pools. She said, "There's a back of the bus and there's a back of the line, but there's no back of a carousel." Then her attention turned to the freedom rides. It was during one of these rides where she was arrested in Jackson, Mississippi for breach of the peace and sent to Parchman Prison for 2 months. She stayed on death row in what was called the most dreaded prison in America. After her release, she enrolled in Tougaloo College in Mississippi as the first white person to ever be admitted, sort of like reverse discrimination, where she joined the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. It was as a student that she became part of the most famous and violent sit-ins in the entire civil rights movement. On May 28, 1963, Joan sought to integrate a whites-only lunch counter with 3 African Americans at the Woolworths in Jackson, Mississippi. She joined Perlina Lewis, Memphis Norman, and Ann Moody for the right to sit at the lunch counter. After several violent outbreaks, when Memphis, Perlina, and Ann were pulled off their stools, they were joined by John Salter, a white man. They were all yelled at, called names, had pepper, salt, and sugar pulled on top of their heads. The crowds were hostile, and Joan did not think that she was going to make it, but she was determined. This went on for more than 3 hours before the head of Woolworth's national office ordered that the entire store be closed. The result of this event in Jackson and others that grew up out of it ended in the assassination of Medgar Evers, the head of the Mississippi NAACP. She would have other close calls with death, in particular in one incident in the summer of 1964 that included a run-in with the Ku Klux Klan during what was called Freedom Summer. After 4 years in the movement, Joan moved back to Arlington County, where she worked in various jobs for the federal government, the Smithsonian Institute, the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Justice, before pursuing a 30-year career as a school assistant at Barcroft Elementary School in Arlington. She raised 5 boys as a single mom. While today she doesn't like to make a big fuss, she knows she did it because it was the right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, Joan Mulholland saw something that was wrong, and she was determined to do something about it. In her own words, she said, "It's not just one person who does it all. It's lots of people that you've never heard of doing what's right, going beyond themselves, making hard choices that causes change. I saw something that was wrong, and I wanted to try to make it right." Mr. Speaker, I move that the clerk please pull House Joint Resolution 829 out of order.
The clerk will report a resolution.
House Joint Resolution number 829, commending Joan Mulholland.
The gentleman from Arlington, Mr. Hope.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, in honor of Joan Mulholland, that put her own life on the line so that others may not suffer, I ask that we adopt House Joint Resolution 829 as the expression of the General Assembly's admiration for her courage and her leadership.
As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.